What does a single cup of coffee cost? For most, it's a few dollars. But for Amelia Hayes, a 22-year-old waitress, drowning in debt and desperation, the cost was her job, her security, and what felt like her last shred of hope. She risked it all for a man society had thrown away, a homeless man with nothing to his name but the dirt on his clothes and a quiet dignity in his eyes. She never could have known that this one simple act of kindness in a forgotten corner of a downtown cafe would ignite a firestorm that would change her life and the lives of countless others forever. This isn't just a story about a waitress and a homeless man. It's a story about the hidden battles we all fight and how the smallest gesture can echo into the highest echelons of power. The Gilded Spoon wasn't as glamorous as its name suggested. It was a relic, a downtown cafe that had seen better decades now caught in the cross-currents of urban renewal. On one side, gleaming new skyscrapers housing tech startups and investment firms cast long, imposing shadows. On the other, the grittier, forgotten streets of the city's underbelly began. The Gilded Spoon sat right on that border, a purgatory of lukewarm coffee and fading dreams. For Amelia Hayes, it was simply the spoon, and it was her whole world. At 22, Amelia's life was a precarious balancing act. By day, she navigated the sticky floors and demanding customers of the spoon, her apron pockets weighed down with pens, order pads, and the constant gnawing anxiety of making rent. By night, she was the sole guardian of her 16-year-old sister Chloe in their cramped, drafty apartment 3 bus rides away. Their parents were a ghost story, a faded photograph on the mantelpiece taken by a car accident 3 years prior. Amelia had been forced to drop out of community college. Her dreams of becoming a professional photographer packed away with her textbooks and her one prized possession, a broken Canon DSLR camera that now served as a very expensive paperweight. This Tuesday morning was particularly bleak. A cold, relentless November rain slicked the streets of Chicago, and the wind howled with a special kind of miserable fury. The cafe was mostly empty, save for a few hurried businessmen grabbing their espresso lattes, their eyes glued to their phones, oblivious to the world around them. Amelia moved between the tables, with a practiced, weary grace, her smile a thin but resilient shield against her own exhaustion. The landlord's eviction notice, a stark red paper she'd found taped to her door yesterday, felt like a lead weight in her gut. They were 2 months behind. Her manager, Mr. Desmond Sterling, was in his usual perch behind the counter, polishing the espresso machine with a fervor he usually reserved for counting the day's earnings. Sterling was a man sculpted from disappointment and corporate policy. He was short with a comb-over that seemed to retreat further back on his scalp with each passing fiscal quarter. His mantra was, "Image is everything." He believed the Spoon's proximity to the new financial district was its golden ticket, and he was pathologically obsessed with maintaining an atmosphere of clean, efficient, and profitable sterility. Anything or anyone that threatened that image was a problem to be eliminated. Amelia was refilling the sugar shakers when the bell above the door chimed, announcing a new arrival. But this was not a businessman in a tailored suit. The man who entered was a spectre of the streets. He was old, perhaps in his late 60s, with a thick but unkempt beard the color of salt and pepper. He wore a threadbare army green jacket over layers of flannel shirts, all of it damp from the rain. His trousers were worn through at the knees, and his boots looked like they had walked 1,000 miles of hard road. He dripped a small puddle onto the freshly mopped linoleum floor, and Mr. Sterling's eyes narrowed instantly. But it was the man's eyes that caught Amelia's attention. They weren't vacant or wooled as she'd seen in some of the city's unfortunate souls. They were a startlingly clear shade of blue, filled with a deep, profound weariness, but also a quiet, observant intelligence. He moved slowly, deliberately, his gaze sweeping over the cafe not with the desperation of a beggar, but with the quiet contemplation of a critic. He chose the smallest, most secluded booth in the back corner, a spot usually ignored by the regulars. He slid onto the cracked vinyl seat, folded his chapped hands on the tabletop, and simply sat staring out the window at the rain-streaked city. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't bother anyone. He just sat. Amelia felt a familiar pang in her chest. It was the same ache she felt whenever she looked at Chloe's pale face or the stack of unpaid medical bills for her sister's recurring respiratory issues. It was the ache of vulnerability, of knowing how easily one could slip through the cracks. Amelia Sterling's voice was a low hiss from behind the counter. "We have a situation." Amelia turned, wiping her hands on her apron. "What situation, Mr. Sterling Booth?" "7. "Code Grey," Sterling said, using his ridiculous, self-invented code for a vagrant. "He's scaring off potential customers." Amelia glanced at the 3 businessmen who hadn't even looked up from their phones. "He's just sitting there, sir. He's not bothering anyone." "He's bothering me." Sterling snapped his voice, barely a whisper. "His presence is a health code violation, waiting to happen." It lowers the tone. "This isn't a shelter. Get rid of him. Get rid of him." Amelia's brow furrowed. "How I don't care how. Tell him he has to order something or leave. He can't order anything, so he'll leave. Problem solved. Do it now before the lunchtime rush." Amelia's heart sank. She looked back at the old man. He looked so frail, so tired. The wind rattled the window pane by his booth, and he flinched slightly, pulling his thin jacket tighter. He was just a man trying to get out of the rain. The thought of forcing him back out into that biting, wet cold felt cruel. It felt wrong. She thought of her father, a kind, barrel-chested man, who always told her, "Kindness, Amy, costs nothing, but it's worth everything." Taking a deep breath, she grabbed a menu and her order pad. She would follow the first part of Sterling's order at least. She would ask him what he wanted. She walked towards booth 7, ignoring the manager's impatient glare. The lead weight in her gut grew heavier. She knew this was a path she shouldn't walk down, but her feet kept moving anyway. Her conscience was a stronger force than her fear. As Amelia approached the booth, the man's clear blue eyes shifted from the window to her. They held no malice, only a quiet resignation, as if he'd played out this exact scene 100 times before. "Good morning, sir." Amelia said, her voice softer than she intended. She placed the laminated menu on the table, its cheerful pictures of pancakes and omelettes, a stark contrast to the grim reality of the moment. "Can I get you something to start with? A hot coffee, maybe, to warm you up?" The man offered a small, sad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His voice when he spoke was raspy from disuse, but carried an unexpected resonance, a faint echo of a more refined accent buried beneath layers of hardship. "Thank you, young lady, but I'm just resting my feet for a moment. I don't want to be a bother." "It's no bother at all." Amelia insisted, her resolve hardening. She saw Mr. Sterling watching from the counter, his arms crossed, his foot tapping an impatient rhythm on the floor. "The coffee's on me. Please, it's a miserable day out there." Before the man could respond, Sterling was upon them. He moved with a predatory silence, his cheap cologne arriving a second before he did. He placed his hands flat on the table, leaning in his voice a low, threatening growl meant only for the three of them. I believe I made myself clear, Amelia. This patron needs to leave. He didn't even look at the man, addressing him only as a problem Amelia had failed to solve. He was just about to order Mr. Sterling. Amelia lied, her heart pounding against her ribs. She looked at the old man, silently pleading with him to play along. Sterling let out a short, derisive laugh. Oh, was he? With what? The lint in his pockets. Sir. He finally addressed the man, his tone dripping with condescension. This is a place of business. We have standards. We have paying customers to consider. You are not a paying customer. You are loitering. I need you to leave the premises. Now. The man's gaze remained fixed on Sterling, his expression unreadable. He didn't flinch. He didn't cower. There was a stillness about him, a strange, unshakable dignity that seemed to infuriate Sterling even more. I understand, the man said, his voice calm. I will be on my way. He began the slow, pained process of sliding out of the booth, his old joints protesting with a soft groan. Something inside Amelia snapped. It was the casual cruelty, the utter lack of empathy in Sterling's voice. It was the sight of this old man, who had asked for nothing, being dismissed like a piece of trash. It was the eviction notice, Chloe's cough, the broken camera, the weight of it all crashing down on her in a wave of righteous fury. No, she said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the air with the sharpness of glass. Sterling straightened up, turning his full venomous attention to her. What did you say, Hayes? I said. No. Amelia repeated, her voice gaining strength. She stepped slightly in front of the old man, creating a small, defiant barrier. He's my customer. And he's staying. He'll have a coffee and the breakfast special. And I will be paying for it. She reached into her apron, her fingers fumbling for the small wad of cash she kept there. Her bus fare and emergency money for the week. It was only about $15, but right now it felt like a fortune she was willing to spend. Sterling's face contorted into a mask of disbelief, which quickly morphed into rage. Are you out of your mind? You will do no such thing. You are undermining my authority and violating company policy. What policy is that? Mr. Sterling. Amelia challenged, her voice ringing with a newfound confidence. The one about basic human decency is that in the employee handbook. Because I must have missed that chapter. A few of the other customers were starting to notice. A woman in a business suit lowered her newspaper. One of the tech bros finally looked up from his laptop, his eyebrows raised. The silent drama was becoming a public spectacle. That's it. Sterling seethed, his face turning a blotchy red. You've been warned. You and your guest are to leave immediately. You're fired, Hayes. Fired. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. Fired. The one word she dreaded more than any other. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath her. The eviction notice. Chloe. How would they survive? Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her anger. But then she looked at the old man. He was watching her, and for the first time, his expression had changed. The resignation was gone, replaced by something else, astonishment, and a flicker of something that looked almost like gratitude so profound. It was heartbreaking. In that moment, seeing that look, she knew she hadn't made a mistake. She had made a choice. Fine. Amelia said, her voice trembling but steady. She began to untie the strings of her apron, the familiar fabric suddenly feeling alien. "I'll leave. But he's going to eat first." She turned to the old man, ignoring Sterling, who stood fuming and momentarily speechless. "Sir, what would you like?" "Really? Anything on the menu. It's my treat." The old man simply shook his head slowly, his blue eyes locking on to hers. "You've already given me more than enough, my dear," he said. His raspy voice filled with an emotion that made Amelia's eyes well up. He then turned his gaze back to Sterling, and the quiet dignity was now tinged with an edge of steel. "There is no need to fire this young woman. I was just leaving." He stood up straighter than before and walked towards the door. He didn't look back. As he pushed the door open, a gust of wind and rain swirled into the cafe. And then he was gone, swallowed by the grey, indifferent city. Amelia stood frozen in the middle of the room, her half-untied apron hanging from her waist. The silence was deafening. The customers were all staring, some with pity, some with morbid curiosity. "Well," Sterling barked, finding his voice again. "What are you waiting for? Get your things and get out. I want you gone in 5 minutes." Amelia didn't say another word. She turned, walked to the staff locker room, and pulled off her apron for the last time. The lead weight in her gut was now a black hole of terror. She had stood up for what was right, but what had it cost her everything? The walk to the bus stop was a blur of rain and tears. Amelia didn't have an umbrella, and the cold November drizzle quickly soaked through her thin jacket, plastering her hair to her scalp. The city, which had always felt vast and impersonal, now seemed actively hostile, its towering buildings like silent, judgmental giants. Each splash from a passing car felt like a personal insult. The word "fired" echoed in her mind with every step. It wasn't just a job she had lost, it was her lifeline. The Gilded Spoon, for all its flaws, was the dam holding back a flood of debt and disaster. Now the dam had burst. The image of the eviction notice with its angry red letters burned behind her eyelids. She pictured the landlord, a gruff, unsympathetic man named Mr. Peterson, showing up with the sheriff. She imagined their meager possessions being piled up on the sidewalk, a monument to her failure. Where would they go? A shelter. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through her. She couldn't subject Chloe to that. She wouldn't. By the time she boarded the bus, she was shivering less from the cold and more from sheer terror. She slumped into a plastic seat. The $15 she had been willing to give away still clutched in her pocket. It now represented nearly every cent she had to her name until a payday that would never come. The bus ride was long and agonizing. She stared out the window at the endless procession of brick buildings, pawn shops, and check-cashing stores. Each one seemed like a station on the road to poverty. Her dream of being a photographer felt like a cruel joke, a fantasy from another life. The broken camera at home was a perfect metaphor for her own shattered ambitions. To fix it would cost hundreds of dollars, an astronomical sum that might as well have been millions. When she finally reached her apartment building, a run-down 3-story brick structure with graffiti scarring its walls, she paused at the entrance. She needed to compose herself. She couldn't let Chloe see her like this. She wiped her eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and pasted on the same resilient smile she wore for the customers at the Spoon. She found Chloe on the couch, wrapped in their thickest blanket, a textbook resting unread in her lap. Her breathing was shallow, punctuated by a soft, persistent wheeze that tore at Amelia's heart. "Hey, you're home early," Chloe said, her voice raspy. She was a bright, perceptive girl, and her eyes immediately registered the tension in Amelia's face. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Amelia lied, forcing a cheerful tone. "Mr. Sterling was feeling generous and let me off early for once." She busied herself in the tiny kitchen, running the tap to avoid Chloe's scrutinizing gaze. "Really, Mr. Time is Money Sterling." "I find that hard to believe," Chloe said, followed by a soft cough. Amelia's facade crumbled. She leaned against the counter, her shoulders slumping. "No. You're right. It's not fine." She turned to face her sister, the truth spilling out in a torrent of whispered, desperate words. There was a man. A homeless man. He came in to get out of the rain. Sterling wanted to throw him out. I stood up to him, Chloe. I couldn't just stand there and watch. And he fired me. Chloe's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and concern filling them. She sat up, letting the blanket pool around her waist. "He fired you for that," he said. I was undermining his authority. Amelia said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I don't know what I was thinking. I couldn't let him do it. But now, the rent, your medicine. God, Chloe, what are we going to do?" Chloe was silent for a long moment. Amelia braced herself for recrimination for the fear she deserved to see in her sister's eyes. Instead, Chloe pushed herself off the couch, walked over to Amelia, and wrapped her thin arms around her waist. "You did the right thing, Amy," she whispered into Amelia's soaked jacket. Dad would have been proud. The simple, unwavering validation was all it took. Amelia's control shattered, and she began to sob, clutching her sister as if she were the only solid thing in a world that was dissolving around her. They stood there for a long time. Two orphans against the world. The silence of their small apartment filled only with the sound of Amelia's grief and Chloe's gentle, wheezing breaths. Later that evening, after a meager dinner of canned soup, Amelia sat at their rickety kitchen table, a single lamp casting a pool of yellow light onto the local paper's classified section. Waitress, dishwasher, cleaner, cashier. Each listing felt like another link in a chain that would forever bind her to a life of struggle. She picked up her broken camera from the shelf, its weight familiar in her hands. She looked through the viewfinder, framing a shot of Chloe sleeping on the couch. Even in the dim light, she could see the composition, the story in the image. The quiet strength in her sister's sleeping face, the vulnerability in the rise and fall of the blanket. A powerful, beautiful sadness. It was a picture she would never get to take. She felt a despair so profound, it was like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She had acted out of kindness, out of a principle she believed in. But in the real world, kindness didn't pay the rent. Principles didn't fill prescriptions. She had made her stand, and now she was paying the price. As she put the camera down, she felt a finality, a closing of a door. The dream was over. Survival was all that was left. While Amelia Hayes was staring into an abyss of financial ruin, the man she had tried to help was staring out at the same rain-swept city, but from a vastly different perspective. He was in a penthouse apartment that occupied the entire top floor of one of the city's newest and most luxurious skyscrapers, the kind of building Mr. Sterling dreamed of catering to. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike panorama of Chicago, the city lights twinkling like a fallen constellation below. The apartment was a symphony of minimalist elegance, polished marble floors, sleek Italian furniture, and a collection of modern art that was worth more than the entire city block where the Gilded Spoon was located. The threadbare army jacket and worn-out flannels were gone discarded on a chair like a shed skin. The man was now showered and dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal grey suit, a crisp white shirt and a silk tie. The unkempt beard had been trimmed, revealing a strong jawline and a face etched with the lines of both immense success and profound sorrow. He was Arthur Kensington, the reclusive, enigmatic founder and CEO of Kensington Global Investments, a multi-billion-dollar empire with interests in finance, technology, and real estate. He was one of the wealthiest men in the world. He stood by the window, a glass of expensive single-malt scotch in his hand, but his mind was miles away, back in the sticky, flawed cafe. He could still see the raw courage in the young waitress's eyes, the tremor in her voice as she defied her odious little manager. He could still feel the warmth of her offer, a simple cup of coffee that felt more valuable than any corporate deal he had ever closed. A quiet cough came from the doorway. "Sir, I was beginning to worry." Arthur turned. Standing there was Marcus Thorne, his chief of staff, personal counsel, and the closest thing he had to a friend. Marcus was impeccably dressed, his face a mask of professional concern, though his eyes betrayed a deeper, more personal anxiety. "You were gone all day, Arthur," Marcus said, stepping into the room. "The board meeting was rescheduled twice. We had to tell them you were dealing with a personal emergency, which I suppose is not entirely untrue." "Every day is a personal emergency, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice now clear and resonant, the street-worn rasp completely gone. He took a sip of his scotch. "I just chose to have mine on the corner of 4th and Elm today." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed silver hair. He had been with Arthur for 30 years, and he still wasn't used to his employer's excursions. For the past year since the accident, Arthur had developed a habit of disappearing for days at a time, shedding his identity, and wandering the city's streets as one of the dispossessed. Marcus had private security teams who discreetly tracked him, but Arthur had forbidden them from ever intervening. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Marcus asked gently. Arthur turned back to the window, his gaze distant. "I don't know what I'm looking for anymore, old friend. A ghost, perhaps." The ghost had a name, Daniel. Daniel Kensington. Arthur's only son and heir had died a year ago. He wasn't like his father. He had no interest in boardrooms or stock portfolios. Daniel was a gentle soul, an idealist with a fierce compassion for the underdog. He had spent his college years volunteering at soup kitchens and homeless shelters, often clashing with Arthur about the moral responsibilities of their immense wealth. "You don't see them, Dad," Daniel used to argue, his young face alight with passion. "You fly over them in your helicopter and look down from your office, but you don't see the people your buildings cast shadows on. Their stories are worth more than your quarterly reports." Daniel had died in a car accident while driving back from a charity event he had organized. The grief had hollowed Arthur out, leaving a void that no amount of money or success could fill. In his sorrow, he became obsessed with his son's words. He wanted to see the world through Daniel's eyes. And so he began his strange pilgrimages, dressing in rags and walking among the forgotten, searching for the humanity his son had championed. For a year he had found mostly indifference and contempt. He had been ignored, cursed at, and kicked out of more establishments than he could count. He was beginning to believe Daniel's idealism was just youthful naivete. Until today. "I met someone," Arthur said, his voice quiet. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "A girl. A waitress." He recounted the entire incident to Marcus in precise detail. The manager's sneering condescension, the girl's initial hesitation, her sudden fierce defense, her offer to pay for his meal from her own meager funds, and finally the word that had chilled him to the bone. "Fired. She lost her job for me, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice hardening with an anger that was cold and absolute. "For a nameless, penniless old man. She sacrificed her livelihood for a principle." He paused, looking at his reflection in the glass, superimposed over the glittering city below. Daniel would have liked her. This was the highest praise Arthur Kensington could bestow. Marcus listened intently, his expression shifting from concern to understanding. He knew what was coming next. "I want to find her," Arthur said, turning to face him. His blue eyes now filled with a purpose that had been missing for a year. "I want to know everything about her. Her name, where she lives, what she dreams of, what she fears. Everything." "That shouldn't be difficult, sir," Marcus replied. "The Gilded Spoon. We can start there. Security cameras, employee records." "No," Arthur interrupted. "Not like that. I want it handled with discretion. Absolute discretion. I don't want her to know we are looking. And the manager, this Mr. Sterling. I want to know about him too. And I want to know about the ownership of that cafe. I want to know everything." A new energy coursed through Arthur. The grief was still there, a permanent fixture in the architecture of his soul. But now it had a companion, a burning sense of mission. For the first time in a year, he wasn't just looking for his son's ghost. He was going to build a monument to him. And the cornerstone of that monument would be a young waitress named Amelia Hayes. "Get the acquisitions team ready," Arthur commanded, placing his glass down with a decisive click. "I have a feeling I'm about to make a small but very significant investment in the food service industry. The resources of a multi-billionaire, when focused on a single objective, operate with the speed and precision of a surgical strike." While Amelia was scouring job listings for minimum wage positions, a silent, invisible machine was whirring to life around her. Marcus Thorne assembled a small elite team from Kensington Global's internal security and legal departments. They were ghosts experts in data mining and discreet inquiry, more accustomed to performing due diligence on multi-million-dollar corporate mergers than finding a down-on-her-luck waitress. The mission was codenamed Project Nightingale. The first step was easy. A simple public record search revealed the owner of the Gilded Spoon to be a mid-sized impersonal chain called Sterling Hospitality Group, run by a board of directors who prioritized profit margins above all else. The on-site manager, Desmond Sterling, was a mid-level employee with a spotless record of maximizing revenue and minimizing overhead, which included, according to his performance reviews, efficiently managing loitering and other non-revenue-generating public traffic. The next step was identifying Amelia. They couldn't simply call the cafe and ask for the name of the waitress who was just fired. That would raise alarms. Instead, Marcus's team deployed a more subtle approach. One of his operatives, a woman who looked like a corporate consultant, visited the Spoon the next day during the lunch rush. She ordered a coffee and, while waiting for a colleague, struck up a conversation with the other long-serving waitress, a cynical, gossipy woman named Brenda. With a few leading questions and a sympathetic ear, the operative learned everything. "Oh, you mean Amelia?" Brenda had said, rolling her eyes. "Yeah, poor kid. Had a heart of gold and a wallet full of moths. Sterling finally canned her yesterday for trying to adopt a stray. Can you believe it? Stood up to him and everything. Stupid if you ask me, but brave. From Amelia, the team quickly found Amelia Hayes in the employee archives they accessed through a cooperating contact at Sterling Hospitality's HR department. A contact persuaded by the promise of a future, much better-paying job at a Kensington-owned entity. The file was a treasure trove of information: her social security number, her last known address, her employment history. It painted a bleak picture of a young woman struggling to stay afloat. The address led them to the rundown apartment building. Surveillance conducted from an unmarked van parked down the street confirmed her presence. They saw her leave in the morning, dressed for interviews, her shoulders slumped in defeat. They saw her return in the evenings, empty-handed and exhausted. They documented her trip to a pharmacy to pick up an inhaler, which led them to Chloe's medical records. The diagnosis was cystic fibrosis, a chronic, life-threatening illness with crushingly expensive treatments. Marcus presented the completed file to Arthur in his penthouse office. It was a thick binder filled with printouts, photographs, and financial summaries. Arthur read every page, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. He saw the eviction notice, a copy of which the team had discreetly obtained from the building superintendent's records. He saw the outstanding medical bills, totaling a figure that would have bankrupted a middle-class family, let alone a single waitress. He saw the application for a student loan for a photography course at the Art Institute of Chicago, denied due to her lack of credit and income. He closed the binder, a muscle tightening in his jaw. "She's drowning, Marcus." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "By all accounts, she has been for a long time. The loss of her job was simply the final push." "And Sterling?" Arthur asked, his voice cold. "Promoted," Marcus said, his tone flat. "He sent a report to corporate detailing how he handled a public nuisance and a subordinate's insubordination protecting the brand's image. They gave him a commendation and a small bonus." Arthur was silent for a full minute, his back to Marcus, as he stared out at the city. The injustice of it was a poison. A man was rewarded for his cruelty, while a woman was punished for her compassion. It was the world Daniel had railed against. "Begin the acquisition," Arthur said finally. "Buy the entire Sterling Hospitality Group. Pay whatever they ask. I want it done by the end of the week. And once we own it, I want Desmond Sterling's termination paperwork on my desk. He is not to be fired. He is to be made redundant. His position will be eliminated when we restructure." "And what about Mr. Sterling's bonus, sir?" Marcus asked. A rare, cold smile touched Arthur's lips. "His bonus, Marcus, will be used to fund the severance package for the waitress he fired." He picked up the phone on his desk. "Get the car ready, and have the black card brought up from the vault." The Kensington Black Card was not a credit card. It was a legend, a myth in the financial world. There was only one in existence. It was made of anodized titanium and offered its holder literally unlimited resources, backed by the full faith and credit of Arthur Kensington's personal fortune. It was a symbol of absolute power. "It's time I had a proper conversation with Miss Hayes," Arthur said. "It's time to show her what a real bonus looks like." Meanwhile, Amelia's world had shrunk to the four walls of her apartment. She had been to 3 interviews in 2 days. At the first, for a position at a bustling sports bar, the manager told her she didn't have the right look. At the second, for a 24-hour diner, the graveyard shift paid so little it wouldn't even cover their rent. The third had been the most humiliating a fast food chain, where she was interviewed by a teenager who dismissed her for being overqualified. Defeated, she was walking the final block home when a long, gleaming black limousine pulled up silently beside her. It was so out of place in her run-down neighborhood that it looked like a spaceship had landed. The tinted rear window glided down with a soft hum. Amelia's first instinct was that she was in the way. She moved to the side, but a calm, familiar voice stopped her. "Miss Amelia Hayes." She peered into the shadowed interior of the car. Her heart stopped. Sitting there, dressed in an immaculate suit that probably cost more than her annual income, was the old homeless man from the cafe. But he wasn't homeless anymore. The weariness was still in his eyes, but it was now the weariness of a king, not a pauper. His blue eyes were just as clear, but now they held an unnerving intensity. "I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss," said Arthur Kensington. "Would you care to join me?" Amelia stood frozen on the cracked pavement, her mind struggling to reconcile the man in the dirty green jacket with the titan of industry sitting before her. The world had just tilted on its axis, and she didn't know which way was up. Amelia's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Was this a trick? A bizarre, cruel joke? Her first instinct was to run. But the man's eyes, the same clear blue eyes she remembered so vividly, held no threat. They held a seriousness, a gravity that compelled her to stay. Hesitantly, she nodded. The door was opened for her by a chauffeur in a crisp uniform. She slid onto the plush leather seat, the interior of the limousine smelling of wealth and power. The door closed with a solid, definitive thud, sealing her inside this strange new reality. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the city gliding by in a blur of muted colors through the tinted windows. Amelia sat rigidly on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her cheap, worn-out coat a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. "I apologize for the unusual circumstances of our reacquaintance," the man finally said, his voice the same resonant baritone she now recognized from the cafe. "My name is Arthur Kensington." The name meant nothing to Amelia. She didn't follow the world of high finance. She was more concerned with the price of bread than the fluctuations of the stock market. Arthur seemed to understand this. "Let me be more direct," he continued. "My recent disguise was part of a personal journey, an attempt to see the world from a different perspective. For a long time, what I saw was disappointing, until I walked into the Gilded Spoon." He looked at her, his gaze direct and piercing. "You, Miss Hayes, were the first person in a very long time to show me a man you believed to be worth nothing, a moment of genuine, selfless kindness. You did so at great personal cost. I am aware that you lost your position because of your actions." Amelia swallowed hard, finding her voice. "How do you know that? Who are you?" "I am a man who has the means to find things out," Arthur said simply. "And I am a man who believes in balancing the scales. What your manager, Mr. Sterling, did was an injustice. What you did was an act of profound character." The limousine pulled into a private underground garage and came to a smooth stop. The chauffeur opened the door, and they were escorted to a private elevator. The ride upwards was swolent and dizzyingly fast. When the doors opened, they stepped directly into the penthouse apartment. Amelia gasped. She had never seen anything like it. The sheer space, the panoramic view of the city laid out like a carpet of jewels, the priceless art on the walls. It was a world she didn't know existed outside of movies. Arthur led her to a comfortable seating area, gesturing for her to sit. He remained standing, looking out the window for a moment, before turning to face her. "My son Daniel passed away a year ago." He began, his voice softening, losing its corporate edge, and becoming deeply personal. He was a great believer in the power of compassion. He felt that people like me, people with wealth and influence, had become disconnected from the fundamental humanity that connects us all. He spent his life trying to help those who were overlooked. He paused, the grief evident in his eyes. After he was gone, I found myself adrift. I decided to try to see the world as he saw it. I walked the streets not as a billionaire, but as one of the invisible people he cared so much about. It was an education, a painful one. He looked directly at Amelia. Your actions that day, Miss Hayes, were a vindication of everything my son believed in. You showed me that the decency he championed was not just a naive dream. It exists. It's rare and it's precious, and you have it in abundance. Amelia was speechless, overwhelmed by the raw emotion in his confession. I have learned a great deal about your circumstances. Arthur continued, his tone shifting back to one of quiet authority. I know about your sister Chloe. I know about her medical needs. I know about your financial struggles, the eviction notice, and your dream of being a photographer. He walked over to a sleek modern desk and picked up a slim black object. It was the titanium card. This is not charity, Miss Hayes. This is an investment. I am investing in you, in your character. I believe people like you should be empowered, not punished. He laid out his proposal, each point delivered with calm, deliberate precision. First, the immediate concerns. I have taken the liberty of settling your outstanding debts, including your rent and all of Chloe's medical bills. Your housing is secure. Amelia's head was spinning. It was too much to comprehend. Second, Chloe's health. I have arranged for her to be seen by the top cystic fibrosis specialists in the country at the Kensington Pediatric Wing of Chicago General Hospital. All of her future medical care, whatever she needs for the rest of her life, will be completely covered. Tears began to well in Amelia's eyes. Chloe safe. It was a prayer she had whispered every night, a hope she thought was impossible. Third, your dream. He gestured towards a large, professional-looking camera bag sitting on a nearby table. That is a Hasselblad X2D, the finest digital camera in the world, along with a full set of lenses. It's yours. Furthermore, your application to the Art Institute of Chicago has been reconsidered. A new scholarship has been established in my son's name, the Daniel Kensington Memorial Scholarship for Compassionate Arts. You are its first recipient. It covers your full tuition housing and a generous stipend for living expenses for the duration of your degree. Amelia was openly weeping, now silent tears streaming down her face. And finally, Arthur said, placing the black card on the table in front of her, I have purchased the Sterling Hospitality Group. As of this morning, I own the Gilded Spoon. Mr. Sterling's position has been made redundant. I am establishing a new foundation, the Daniel Kensington Foundation for Compassion. Its mission will be to identify and support individuals who perform acts of kindness and to create community initiatives like Pay It Forward cafes and shelters. He slid the card towards her. I want you to be on the board of that foundation. This card is your key. It will give you access to the resources needed to help others as you helped me. It represents a simple truth that your compassion is your greatest asset, and I am empowering you to use it. He finished, leaving a profound silence in the room, broken only by Amelia's quiet sobs. He had not just offered her money. He had given her back her life. He had restored her sister's health. He had resurrected her dream. He had taken her single, small act of kindness and magnified it into a force for unimaginable good. Slowly, her tears subsiding, Amelia reached out a trembling hand and touched the cool, smooth surface of the titanium card. She looked up at Arthur Kensington, the billionaire who had looked like a beggar, and for the first time since she was fired, she smiled. A real, genuine smile of pure, unadulterated hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know what else to say. Thank you." "Don't thank me," Arthur said, a faint, sad smile on his own lips. "Thank my son. And thank yourself for reminding a jaded old man what truly matters." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of transformative change, so rapid and profound that Amelia often felt like she was living in a dream. The black hole of despair that had consumed her was replaced by a dazzling constellation of possibilities. The first and most important change was Chloe. Within days, she was admitted to the pristine, state-of-the-art Kensington Pediatric Wing. The team of doctors who met with them spoke not in terms of managing a decline, but of new treatments of improving quality of life, of a future measured in decades, not years. For the first time, Amelia saw the cloud of constant worry lift from her sister's eyes, replaced by a bright, hopeful spark. Watching Chloe laugh with a nurse, her breathing already easier thanks to new medication, was a joy so pure it almost hurt. Their cramped, drafty apartment was abandoned. Arthur's people moved them into a spacious, sun-drenched condominium overlooking Lincoln Park. It had a spare room that Amelia immediately converted into a dark room and digital editing studio. The Hasselblad camera felt like a sacred object in her hands. She spent hours relearning her craft, not with the pressure of trying to make a living, but with the pure, unadulterated passion of an artist. Her first official project was a portrait series of the other children in Chloe's hospital wing, capturing their resilience and spirit with an empathy that brought tears to the eyes of the hospital staff. Her first day at the Art Institute was terrifying and exhilarating. She was no longer an outsider looking in, but a peer among talented, driven artists. The Daniel Kensington Memorial Scholarship made her something of a legend on campus before she even arrived, but she carried herself with a quiet humility that quickly earned her respect. Her professors were stunned by the emotional depth and technical skill of her work. Her lens was drawn to the same subjects Daniel Kensington had championed: the overlooked, the invisible, the people living in the shadows of the city. Her photos told their stories with a dignity and grace that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. As for the Gilded Spoon, it closed for a month and underwent a radical transformation. When it reopened, it was hardly recognizable. The dingy linoleum was replaced with warm hardwood floors, the cracked vinyl booths with comfortable, welcoming seating. But the biggest change was the sign on the door. It was now called Daniel's Place. The business model was revolutionary. It was a pay-it-forward cafe. Meals were priced affordably, but customers were encouraged to pay extra to cover the cost of a meal for someone who couldn't afford it. A simple chalkboard near the entrance kept a running tally of meals available. No one was ever turned away. The new manager was a woman who had spent 10 years running a local soup kitchen. The staff were paid a living wage with full health benefits. On the wall behind the counter where Mr. Sterling used to obsessively polish the espresso machine, there was now a large, beautifully framed photograph. It was a black and white portrait taken by Amelia. It depicted an old man's hands, chapped and weathered, wrapped around a simple, steaming mug of coffee. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read, "In memory of Daniel Kensington, who believed that a single cup of coffee, offered with kindness, could change the world. And in honor of Amelia Hayes, who proved him right." Amelia would often visit Daniel's place, sitting in the same back booth where she had first met Arthur. She would watch as businessmen in suits paid for the lunches of construction workers and students bought coffees for the elderly. She saw the spirit of her one small action replicated 100 times a day. She never saw Arthur Kensington as much as she felt his presence. He remained a reclusive figure, but his investment in her had reignited his purpose. Through the foundation which Amelia helped guide with a wisdom beyond her years, they funded dozens of community projects, always focusing on small, impactful acts of compassion. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after their fateful meeting, Amelia was setting up her camera in the park when she saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench watching the leaves fall. It was Arthur. He wasn't in a suit or in rags, but in a simple, tasteful jacket and trousers. He looked peaceful. She walked over and sat beside him, and for a long time they said nothing, simply sharing the comfortable silence of two people bound by an extraordinary event. "He would be so proud of you," Arthur said finally, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "He would be proud of you," Amelia replied softly. "You're keeping his spirit alive." Arthur Kensington finally looked at her, and his eyes, those same clear blue eyes, were filled not with the sorrow of a grieving father or the power of a billionaire, but with a simple, profound gratitude. He had set out to find a ghost to understand his son's world. And in the process, thanks to a waitress who refused to let kindness be extinguished, he had found something far better, a legacy, and a reason to keep living. The story of Amelia Hayes and Arthur Kensington reminds us that our true worth isn't measured by our bank account, but by the content of our character. In a world that often rewards cruelty and dismisses compassion, one young woman's refusal to look away created ripples that she could never have imagined. She lost a job, but gained a destiny. It proves that you never know who you're helping. The person society has cast aside could be an angel in disguise, or in this case a billionaire searching for a reason to hope again. What would you have done in Amelia's shoes? It's a question we should all ask ourselves. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in the power of kindness, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that inspire and move you. Click that notification bell so you never miss a story. Thank you for watching.